In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through the timeline assignment instructions. So I'm just going to talk about the nuts and bolts of the assignment itself, kind of what the substance is and what you're being asked to complete with this assignment. Remember that we'll be doing these assignments, I should say, for units 2 through 6. You will post to the timeline for Unit 1, but it will look a little different, and the specific instructions for how to do that are included in the Unit 1 learning module. All right, if you're not sure where to find this assignment sheet, please review the course tour tutorial or just look at the syllabus and you should be able to find it there. If you haven't yet looked at the video tutorials for how to log into Tiki-Taki or how to post your work to Tiki-Taki, I won't be addressing those things in this video, but do watch those tutorials for answers to those specific questions. So since I've shown some of those things about getting the link to the timeline, logging in with these credentials elsewhere, I'm just going to scroll down. There is an FAQ, so click that if you have some questions. The answer might be there. I'll have links to this video and the others in this instructions section, so I'm going to change that just a little bit after I complete this video. The timeline assignment is completed in 2 parts. So whether you're in an intersession section of New Mexico history or in a longer term, either 8, 12, or 15-week section of New Mexico history, you'll complete the timeline in 2 parts. You'll do the identification step, and then later in the unit, you'll complete the connection step. This document here, or these instructions, I should say, are for an intersession section of the course. So just note that if you're not in an intersession New Mexico history, each unit lasts more than 2 days. That's just for the intersession. All right, so for the identification step, you will choose a topic in New Mexico history that has something to do with the unit that we're currently studying. So I gave the example of Unit 2. In Unit 2, we cover all the way from the first peoples to inhabit what became New Mexico through the Pueblo Revolt. So it's wide open based on the reading, the videos, the things that you've been studying as you did your reading tweets and other things. You'll choose a topic that's interesting to you, something that you want to study in a little bit more depth. And the point of this assignment is for you to find another source about the topic you've chosen, read that source, and then using that information as well as the information from the course textbook and the learning module to present us with your interpretation of why that topic is historically significant. As I noted, or as I note right here, you need to choose a topic that has not yet been chosen on the course timeline. So as I'm going through Unit 2, I decided that I want to talk about Chaco Canyon. And so what I need to do first, before I do anything else, because I'm going to put a lot of work, a lot of time into creating my identification step for Chaco Canyon, I'm going to go to New Mexico history. This is the course timeline. That's just in another tab, so I just read what was on the tab. Here's our course timeline on Tiki-Taki. As you'll notice, there's not much there yet, just the examples that I've created for these video tutorials. So I'm looking at the timeline and I see there's a post on the Bering Strait Land Bridge, or Beringia. There's this post. This one's actually about Pohnpei. You can do Pohnpei if you want. This is just an example for the connection step. But again, just for the sake of argument, I look and I see, okay, Bering Strait Land Bridge has been done. Pohnpei has been done, but Chaco Canyon has not. So what I'm going to want to do then is click Admin. I'm going to click Create New Story. And here where it says title, I'm going to type Chaco Canyon. Then I'm going to scroll down to, oh, my head's in the way. Let me get it out of the way. Excuse me. Then I'm going to write my name. I know this is a place. And I don't know a lot yet because I haven't done my research, but I do know that Chaco Canyon was inhabited in the Classic period in the early years AD. So I'm just going to put this at 580 for now, because that's close enough for right now. I'm going to pick November 1st because you have to click something on the calendar, click confirm, and I have it in the ballpark. Now, when I do my research, I'm going to find the specific dates for Chaco Canyon, when it was first inhabited, when it was roughly around the time when it was abandoned, about 1100-ish. So I'll find all that out and I'll update this when I go back. But for the sake of just adding a placeholder, this is all I need to do. Don't need to add anything else, just the title, general time frame, and my name. Then I'll click save. I'll delete this later so that if you want to do Chaco Canyon for our class, you can. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say add a placeholder. This is claiming your topic. You'll go back and complete it later after you've done your work elsewhere. You don't do your work right on Tiki-Taki. You complete your work in a Word document or similar to Google Doc, whatever you use, and then you copy and paste that information to Tiki-Taki. All right. So as I wrote here, in a Word document or similar, whatever you use, you will state the title, the name of the person, the event, the theme that you've chosen. You will locate an outside source. And all I mean by that is that you go online and you identify a source that we haven't read for class, that also provides some information about the topic that you're interested in. And so you do want to make sure that it's a credible source. And so I've given you some hints here. Please don't use Wikipedia or encyclopedia sites, because those, they're not bad. They provide good information, but generally they're just kind of definitions. What we're looking for are authors' interpretations as well as definitions. So you'll want to find an article from a historical blog site or something like Smithsonian.com, or the New Mexico State, the Office of the State Historian for New Mexico, their website, things like that. You can, again, just start with doing a Google search to see what comes up, but you'll need to be choosy about the article that you pick. You will also find an image or a video of your topic. So you'll go to YouTube and you'll search for your topic. Again, be discerning about which videos you choose. If you look for images, don't just click on the first thing that pops up and use it, but instead you'll want to make sure that the image actually represents the topic that you think it does. So for example, sometimes I've seen for Albino Perez, who we see in the Chimayo Revolt in 1837. He was the governor that was appointed from Mexico City to New Mexico. He was killed in that revolt. And there are no images that I've been able to find of him. So if something like that happens, sometimes you'll see images of people who were written about in the same story as him. So sometimes when you search for Albino Perez, you'll find images of Miguel Armijo, who was later a governor. Make sure, again, that you actually have found the person you think that you've found. So click on the image, read the text around it, get some information about what it is. If you find that there isn't an image or a video available, it's okay to just choose something adjacent, or even a New Mexico landscape, something like that. But do put an image on your identification step. You're going to write a few paragraphs about the topic you've chosen. So you will have read that outside source. You will have read about it in our class textbook. And what you want to do is explain to us why this topic is significant to New Mexico history. And so I'm going to click on this example that I created and open that real quick, just to show you a little bit more of what I mean by that. So you'll notice, or you will have noticed on the timeline, there was that entry on the Bering Strait land bridge. This is the Google Doc that I created for that entry. So this is the kind of thing you'll want to do. Whether you use Google Docs or Word Docs or whatever it is, you will write all of the information for your identification step here before you take it to Tiki-Taki. So you'll notice I have the title, I have the date range here, I have a link to my outside source. I found something that was pretty good on Scientific American. I have a link to both a video and an image. You don't have to do both of those things. You just choose one or the other. And then here is the part that I was just starting to talk about. So I've written 3 paragraphs in which I do define what the Bering Strait land bridge was. So you should approach this from the kind of perspective that people that read this may not have read about this topic in the same depth as you. They may not have read about, they may not have, they might have sort of passed this up. And so you want to explain what it is. And then what I've done in this last paragraph, I'm going to make my head a little smaller here, is I have explained the historical significance. This doesn't necessarily take a lot of space. You don't have to write paragraph after paragraph to explain historical significance. But this is where I'm providing my interpretation, and I'm telling you why I think this thing is important. So I've written, Beringia holds significance to New Mexico history because it was the major pathway for the arrival of the region's earliest inhabitants. And then I go on to talk about who those inhabitants were and how their culture and lifeways established settlement in the area that became New Mexico. What I want to point out here is that I have included a specific reason that this is significant. So I'm making an argument. I've taken a stand, I've taken a position, saying this is why this is significant. It's not enough to make kind of general statements and say that Beringia changed New Mexico forever because it brought people here. That doesn't say much. I mean, we have a tendency, though, to want to make those kinds of generalizations and say, this thing changed New Mexico history forever. That may be true, but you need to explain why and how. Saying that doesn't really mean anything, but the why, the how, the because, that's what explains the historical significance. And that's what we're looking for here. So that's the ID step for this assignment. I'm going to move my head back over here real quick. There we go. So once you've done your timeline ID step that I just talked through, you will then do a connection step. So as I mentioned here, for the intersession identification step is due the first day of the unit. Depending on, again, what length of class you're in, the due date will be different, but the ID step will come first, and then a little while later, the connection step will be due at the same time as your journal entry. So the connection step will ask you to go back to the timeline and locate one of your peers' contributions to the timeline that is related to your own. So you need to look for things that do connect. So for example, if somebody wrote about the Paleo Indians, who were some of the first peoples to arrive in New Mexico, I could make a connection between Paleo Indians and Beringia by explaining that that was the pathway that some of those people came across to arrive in North America generations before they settled in New Mexico. There needs to be some sort of direct connection between your topic and what you're connecting to. It's not a comparison, so do keep that in mind. And it's easy to compare, figures like Juan de Oñate and Hernán Cortés. They were both conquistadores, but they lived in different times. And their lives, you can maybe make a case for a connection there, but you're going to have to do that if you want to make the connection. Don't just compare them and say they were both conquistadores and they did similar things and that sort of direction. You do want to think about historical significance again. So why does it matter that we have made a connection between these two things? What does that help us to better understand about New Mexico history? As I've shown in the other video about adding your work to the timeline, once you've typed your connection paragraph in a Word document or similar, you will paste it at the end of your peer's timeline entry. So whichever one you're connecting to, you'll go to the very end of it, paste it there, and then you will also submit your document in Brightspace. And that's the case with all of these things for the timeline assignment. All right, so that's essentially what we're doing. And the thing to keep in mind then is you need to talk about historical significance in the timeline assignment. This is a place where you're showing us your interpretation of the historical topic that you've chosen. So it's not just trying to be Wikipedia and give us a definition and say this is the thing, but instead, here's the thing, this is what it is, this is why it matters, this is why we all need to understand it. In other words, you've answered the question, so what? This is the so what. this is why this matters. Because as we've talked about at the beginning of our course in the first unit, history is all about finding as many perspectives, as many sources as we can, understanding why some of them are different, realizing that they all contain biases of one kind or another, and then reading them together so that we can arrive at the best understanding and the fullest picture of the past as possible. That means that we have to make decisions about interpretation. Historians interpret and make arguments based on evidence. So again, they're not just giving their opinions, but they are highly educated, well-researched interpretations of what happened. And that's why historians debate amongst themselves about which opinions, or excuse me, which slip there, Freudian slip, which interpretations are the strongest, that make the most sense, and why. And so that's another reason that history is a dynamic field and something that is always changing and always evolving and growing. So hopefully that's what the timeline assignment will give you a chance to see and be part of. It'll also give you a chance to sort of pick your way through what we're studying. New Mexico history is a huge topic. We're supposed to cover from 11,000 BCE to the present, essentially, in this class, in 2 weeks if you're in the intercession, in 15 weeks if you're in a full-term course. There's no possible way we could talk about everything that's actually relevant to New Mexico history. So, as an author of our class textbook, as the instructor, I've made choices about the things that kind of compose a narrative that help us to understand some of the highs and lows and most important turning points in New Mexico's past. But there are other things, right? And there are other things you could select to study in more depth and bring to us as a class and say, this is why we should be thinking about this too. Or this is why we should really emphasize this thing that we found in the textbook. All right. I'll leave it there. As with everything in our course, don't hesitate to ask questions. And I hope that you enjoy working on the timeline.